So it's coming up to about 1 year now since I've had the Canon R5 Mark II. So I thought it's about time I spoke about this camera. As a long-time owner of the original R5, which was my absolute workhorse for years, was it really worth the upgrade? I'll talk about my experiences with this camera, the cons and the great things about it. We'll cover it all. So I'm out super early. The plan is to get some sunrise shots here at the Colosseum, but it's looking a bit gloomy at the moment. But hopefully, if the light turns nice, this is a good opportunity to show off the colors and the image quality of the Canon R5 Mark II for things like portraits. So let's talk about photo, image quality and the colors. And for me, the original R5 always delivered those kind of classic Canon warm tones. And I wouldn't say really a lot's changed with the Mark II. You still get very vibrant, punchy colors and flattering skin tones. I'd call it pretty true to life looking, with just a touch of warmth that gives images a subtle lift. That said, just like with the original R5, I do find that things can often be a little bit too saturated for my taste, especially in the standard color profile. So oranges and red in particular are often pushed a little bit too far for me, and I'm often in post dialing them back a little bit. So compare that to say the R6 Mark II, which has actually got my favorite color rendering of any camera on the RF mount. That's a lot more neutral in comparison. And when the R5 Mark II was announced, I did really hope that we'd kind of see the same color update that we saw between the original R6 and the R6 Mark II. So a shift back to, say, a slightly more neutral look. But honestly, I don't really think a whole lot has changed here in the R5 Mark II. Maybe skin tones lean a little bit less magenta and a touch more towards yellow, which I do actually prefer, to be fair, over the original. Here's a side-by-side portrait so you can see what I mean, comparing the original R5 to the Mark II. So you let me know what you think, if there's any kind of major color differences here. Don't get me wrong though, the R5 II produces absolutely gorgeous images. So when you give this sensor good light, the rendering and colors are just stunning, with that real classic Canon look with tons of contrast and detail. And I'll take the color science from this camera, even if it's not perfect, over just about any other camera I've tried from any other brand. And for portraits, this camera has really become my go-to. So if I want the absolute best image quality possible, this is the body that I reach for, and it has not let me down once. So the R5 Mark II is definitely my go-to camera when I'm doing portraits in the studio. And to be honest, the only real reason for that is that 45 megapixels, because I just feel like when I'm in the studio, when I'm shooting with strobes, I want to get the most detail out of my images as possible. But is it really that much of a step up over the R6 Mark II? I've never actually tested it in a sort of studio environment, so I'm going to use the 70-200 2.8 on both the R5 Mark II and the R6 Mark II. We'll see if there's a difference in detail and resolution, and if it's really that noticeable. So as you can see, it's not a night and day difference. The R6 Mark II gets really close, but under controlled lighting like this, the R5 Mark II just shines. The detail that it pulls out in the eyes and in the skin is just incredible. Now, obviously, clients are pretty much never going to notice these kind of subtle differences in detail and resolution, but I do like knowing that I'm capturing the maximum detail possible in my portraits. So that's why the R5 Mark II is my absolute go-to in the studio when I do really want to deliver the best results possible. And honestly, with this camera, I always find that models and clients are always blown away with what they see on the back of the camera. I've truly lost count of how many times I've heard that classic line from a model who looks at the back of the camera and just says something like, "Wow, your camera is amazing." And those benefits I see in portraits really do carry on over to landscapes as well. So anytime you do want maximum detail, this camera just delivers. The 45 megapixels give you so much croppability, and it really shines in those demanding, super detailed scenes. And I'll say this as well, I think that the shots do seem a little bit sharper from the R5 Mark II compared to the original R5. And I can't prove that they technically are or anything like that, but just having used the original R5 more than any other camera, the Mark II just feels like it has slightly deeper blacks, which really helps give it that kind of perceived step up in sharpness. And one of the differences that people really point out between the Mark I and the Mark II is dynamic range. Now, on paper, the Mark II is supposed to be a bit of a step down because of that stacked sensor, sacrificing a bit of dynamic range in exchange for speed. And for me, honestly, that is a trade-off that I would normally never want to make. But in real world shooting, I just don't see that loss for myself. I'm sure it is there if you push this camera in the right test scenario, but I haven't run into any situation in the real world that's revealed it. So for me, this camera easily has way more dynamic range that I'm ever going to need for my style of shooting. I just find in general underexposing works really well with this camera. Even heavy shadow recovery doesn't really seem to come with much of a penalty, just like the original R5 to be fair. So overall, on the photo side of things, I'm still getting all of the quality that I loved from the original R5. And honestly, when I was first deciding whether to buy this camera, I really didn't think that there was that much that was very compelling for me enough in the photo department to really justify the upgrade. For me, it really felt like all of the improvements were really on the video side of things. Or at least that's what I thought until I actually got the camera in my hands and used it.
So there are actually two features on the photo side of things that when I originally got the R5 Mark II, I wasn't really that excited about. I didn't think that they'd particularly be features that I find useful, but I've actually completely changed my mind on them. So the first one is the IAF. Again, I don't really shoot wildlife or sports or anything like that, and kind of just assumed that it would just be beneficial for action photographers. But I really love it for travel because I find it so much easier when I'm using the EVF to set a focus point using the IAF. I think it's way quicker than the joystick and even using touch and drag on the back of the screen. So I love using it when traveling for just getting my focus point exactly where I want it on scenes where there's no subjects, whether that's just landscapes or just shooting around a city or something like that. The second feature is pre-continuous shooting, so the kind of pre-capture in photo. Again, thought this was just for sports shooters, but I found it really useful when traveling as well. If you want to get a specific bit of motion in your scene, say a bird flying through, I've used it loads for that. So that's another feature that I really love that I didn't think that I would use at all.
Before we continue guys, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. Now, as a photographer, having a website that showcases your work, I think is a must, and it just doesn't get any easier than Squarespace because there's no coding or design skills needed. It is mostly just drag and drop. And now Squarespace even have amazing AI tools like Design Intelligence and Blueprint AI, which can all help you create a personalized website in just a couple of easy steps. And of course, the fully customizable, amazing looking photo galleries are just perfect for showing off your portfolio to potential clients. Squarespace also has fantastic e-commerce tools that I rely on that just really make setting up your own online store a breeze. So that means you can start selling in no time, and you can also handle many different payment types seamlessly thanks to Squarespace payments. So if you are ready to get started, well, head on over to squarespace.com/jamesreader and use code jamesreader for 10% off your first domain or website. Another big improvement is with the electronic shutter. So on the original R5, when shooting at the highest speeds, you would have to drop down to 12-bit files. But now with the R5 II, you can shoot up to now an even faster 40 frames per second and still keep full 14-bit files. Now I tested the actual real-world difference between these two file types when the R5 II first came out, and the difference isn't massive, but still, it is nice to know that you're no longer making that sacrifice, and you're also getting a whole lot better rolling shutter performance out of the R5 Mark II, thanks to the stacked sensor as well. Also, reliability-wise, I found this to be a pretty big step forward as well, because I haven't had a single error with the R5 Mark II, whereas with the original R5, I'd sometimes run into freezes on long shooting days, especially at say weddings, when I'm firing off a lot of bursts. I would often have to pull the battery out just to get the camera working again, and that happened quite a lot on many shoots, but so far with the Mark II, that issue seems to have completely disappeared. Finally, autofocus, and honestly, it is a pretty big leap over the original. So back when I first had the original R5, coming from a Lumix system, I just didn't think the autofocus could get much better than that, but then the R6 II came along and proved me wrong with even better results. And now I really think that the R5 Mark II has done that again. Because in photo mode, it's just flawless. It's lightning fast, it's very accurate, and it's unbelievably reliable. That's the biggest difference. At this point, I really don't know how autofocus can get any better than this, but I'm sure that Canon will surprise me again and keep improving it somehow. Now, is it all perfect on the photo side? No, and one area that I think has taken a bit of a step backwards is low light performance in photo. So at higher ISOs, I'd say beyond ISO 6400, the difference becomes a little bit noticeable. So I think it's still absolutely usable, don't get me wrong, but I personally feel like the original R5 handled those situations a little bit better. And still, the R6 Mark II I think is noticeably stronger in low light situations when it comes to photo. Another minor gripe for me, and still an annoying one though, is that sometimes when I'm shooting with flash or just shooting in general and I want to review an image, the camera won't actually show me the latest image in playback, and it's so annoying because it pulls up the second to last shot. And I have no idea why, it makes no sense, and it can kind of break the flow a little bit when you're trying to quickly check your results, so I hope they fix that soon. But honestly, that's about it. I think that Canon has done a fantastic job with the photo side of the R5 Mark II, and it's probably the closest thing that I've ever used to the perfect stills camera. And if anything, kind of feels like overkill for me. But where I do think it becomes a very compelling upgrade is for sports and wildlife shooters. So if you're coming from the original R5, then that combination of pre-capture, faster burst rates, 14-bit electronic shutter, improved rolling shutter, and the improved autofocus makes this a very, very strong step up. Now let's talk about video, and honestly, video was the main reason that I decided to upgrade to the Mark II. I was really hoping for a pretty big step up over the original R5, and I can say that this camera has absolutely delivered. Before picking up the Mark II, I was using the Canon C70, and for me, the R5 II gets close enough in dynamic range and color and image, whilst also giving me full frame, that I decided that it was actually time to let go of the Canon C70. So with the addition of C-Log 2, this is by far the best image that I've seen from any Canon mirrorless hybrid that I've used, both in terms of color and dynamic range. It's also just so much easier to expose than the original R5, which was always a little bit finicky to get right. But with the R5 Mark II, you can kind of expose pretty neutrally and still have loads of flexibility in post to get the look that you want and to push and pull things. And although the image is coming from a 45 megapixel sensor, I don't think that it looks overly sharp, and it still has a nice organic feel to it. The 8K RAW in particular is a huge step forward. It is just much more cleaner and way more usable than the original R5, so it's no longer caked in noise, and the amount of detail this thing captures in 8K in general is just unbelievable. You just get so much detail from this camera. One thing I really love about the R5 Mark II is just how many different recording codec options that you get as well, because there are so many different compression levels to choose from. Whether you want, say, more manageable file sizes for bigger projects, or you want to go all out and capture massive raw files for maximum image quality, and honestly, any option that you pick just looks great. Well, almost all of it, because the one exception is 4K 60, which is line skipped and ends up looking a little bit soft and muddy. It's still usable if you want to add a little bit of sharpening, but if you compare it side by side to the R6 Mark II, then the R5 II just isn't nearly as clean. That said though, it is still actually pretty close to what I get out of my Canon C80, so I think it really is more that the R6 Mark II just happens to have fantastic 4K 50. The 4K 120 again is on the softer and noisier side, but honestly, it's not something that I use a whole lot. Slow motion wasn't exactly a strong point on the original R5, and there's not much of a huge improvement here at all. Again, side by side with the C80 though, the R5 Mark II holds up surprisingly well. And that's just it. This camera gets incredibly close to the image from my cinema camera, the Canon C80. In fact, side by side, they look very similar. I'd still give the edge in color to the C80. It's just a little bit nicer to my eye, but in every mode, the R5 Mark II keeps up with the cinema camera, even in dynamic range, which is seriously impressive for a hybrid camera. And again, dynamic range is just excellent. I just love the colors out of this camera with C-Log 2. I've yet to find a scene that challenges it. I think the highlight roll-off is also much nicer than the original R5. And shadows just recover so easily. So any scene that you throw at this camera, I really think that it is more than cut out to deal with. And gone are the days now where it felt like on Canon we were a step behind the competition in terms of dynamic range. this camera is just simply excellent. Honestly, in a lot of ways, it could probably replace my C80 if it wasn't for one big reason that we'll touch on later. Low light performance in video is also really solid, so even though I think the R5 II takes a step back in stills at high ISOs, for video I'll regularly push this beyond ISO 6400 and I still find the results to be more than usable. Again, compared it to my C80, which is an absolute low light beast, the R5 II is a step down, but it gets surprisingly close, even without the benefit of a triple base ISO that the C80 enjoys. Another new feature that I love on the R5 II is pre-capture. It's just unbelievably useful for action, sport, or any kind of movement because it records up to 5 seconds of footage before you even hit record. So it just means that you never miss those kind of fleeting moments. Autofocus in video is also just unbelievable. So honestly, it's as simple as that. It'll just lock onto and track the eye of any subject, whether it's human or animal, and it's rock solid. And it even feels like a clear step up over the already excellent R6 Mark II. I just never have to worry about it or step in to correct it or interfere. The camera just nails focus every time. That said, it's not all perfect and I do have a couple of complaints on the video side.
So one of my big issues with the R5 Mark II is definitely overheating. I don't think they really solved it over the Mark I, but I'm in Rome at the moment and it is so hot. But using it for short clips, even fairly long clips, like a few minutes, I never have overheating issues, even in these hot temperatures and shooting in the direct sun. But for longer form stuff, I have had issues. So I don't really use it as like an A-roll camera anymore for talking head stuff, because I have found that randomly, sometimes it can record for 2 hours, then other times it'll overheat in half an hour.
So yeah, for me, the R5 Mark II hasn't been as reliable as I'd hoped. In fact, after Canon pushed all of those firmware updates to the original R5, I actually found the Mark I to be way more dependable for longer recording sessions. Stabilization is also still one of my biggest complaints, so we're still seeing those corner wobbles and that weird corner warping, and honestly, it really can ruin shots. I remember when this camera was first announced, I watched Peter McKinnon's kind of early review of it, and he said that he hadn't noticed a wobble and that it seemed remedied, which really got my hopes up before I got to test this camera. But in my experience, it is definitely still there, especially at 24mm and wider. That's actually one of the big reasons that I recently pre-ordered the new Canon C50. And a lot of people were upset that that camera doesn't have IBIS, but honestly, I'm relieved because I'd much rather rely on the really good optical IS in my lenses than deal with this kind of warping in video. I just really wish that Canon would give us that option to fully disable IBIS and just rely on optical stabilization in the lens. I am, however, pretty pleased with battery life. So we've got a new battery now in the R5 Mark II, and as a result, despite all of these new features, the battery life I think is just as good as the original R5. So for a full day shooting, I'll only need 2 or 3 batteries. And for just taking quick clips when I'm like making videos and traveling, 1 battery easily lasts me all day. I'll quickly touch on the handling with this camera, and this camera has all of that amazing Canon ergonomics that I absolutely love, with a super comfortable grip. And the R5 Mark II does feel a bit bigger and heavier in the hands over the R6 Mark II, but that can help when handling, using bigger lenses like the 24-105 2.8. And it also helps keep your footage looking pretty steady as well. The EVF on this camera is also incredible. The screen is just the best that I've used on any camera, and the button placement I think is practically perfect. Also, this camera has been super reliable for me, even in bad weather. This is just an incredible hybrid camera, and switching between photo and video is absolutely effortless and fast. So final thoughts, was this camera really worth it for me? So should I have upgraded? Well, for photo, I would honestly say no. I just haven't really seen any kind of big meaningful upgrade that really would have justified it for me purely as a photographer. Image quality and functionality are just so close to the original R5 that unless you're shooting sports and wildlife, there isn't really too much reason to switch, I don't think. And in those cases, sure, the faster burst rates and better autofocus and pre-capture could really make the upgrade worthwhile. But for me, as mainly a portrait photographer and wedding and travel photographer, there's no real major leap here for me. And really, I think all that does is just highlight just how fantastic the original R5 still is on the photo side and how it really is a better buy than ever. If you're not shooting any kind of crazy demanding action, the original R5 is the smarter choice for most photographers. It really is an incredible camera and one of the best cameras that I have ever used. But as a hybrid shooter where video is now a huge part of my work, this was a massive upgrade. Finally having C-Log 2 in a hybrid body paired with the image quality this camera delivers really feels like Canon fixed most of what I needed fixed from the original R5. And I've used it side by side time after time with the Canon C80, and I can honestly say that the R5 Mark II is giving me cinema camera level video. It is just that good. And in 2025, this really feels like Canon's most no compromise body yet. But what do you guys think? Was the R5 Mark II a win in your eyes? Or maybe you have the original and you're sticking with it and you're happy with it? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. But that's it. That's my review. I really hope it was helpful. Thank you guys so much as always for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.